have so many questions for the whole team here, but Maryam, I mean, just to kick it off, can you talk about what was the original idea that came to you? Did you always conceive of it as this sprawling saga, or was there were you starting with one small part of this family story that then grew? And when did you start it?
It was revenge against my brothers. No, just kidding.
It worked.
We had to share one bathroom. It was hard. Honestly, it started, be careful when you tell stories, it started when I was at a Creative Capital retreat and I was telling stories about smuggling tapes into Iran and about family secrets. And there were some people laughing so hard, and one of those people was Natalie Difford from Cinereach. Uh-huh. And if you know Cinereach, they did like Beasts of the Southern Wild. They actually financed the post of my film, a lot of great films. And she was like, "You have to make that into a film." And I was like, "Yeah, whatever. Who wants to hear that?" But then when Trump took power and everything started becoming very uncomfortable for immigrants in this country, I thought, maybe it is a good time to write such a story, to tell our own stories, because I felt like as Iranian Americans as a young child, we were villainized as you see in the film, for being terrorists with the hostage crisis, later on the Axis of Evil, then the Muslim ban. So I thought it would be a great place to start, but I didn't know where to start. So the first script was 190 pages. It was about all my family members. And then slowly I started to realize it really is a story of me and my mother and of 3 generations of women. So I was able to, develop it. They were the world's best development producers, because they were letting me find my voice in the process, in the probably 12 drafts that I wrote. But they let me come. They were giving me feedback, but they were always looking to make, because it's not a traditional structure. They didn't try to fit it into a traditional 3-act structure. They just let me find my voice in the process. So it was great.
So I wanted to ask you about two related things. One is the structure, and the second is tone. And I think they're related. But how early in the process did you know it was going to take sort of a nonlinear structure and be told in this way? Did you write it in a more linear way and then cut it up and move things around?
I never wrote it linearly. I have to say it was always nonlinear. I knew I wanted to make a comedy, but a Persian comedy, so you have to laugh and cry. That's part of our culture. So I knew it had those elements. The section that's the mother section was essentially always exactly as it was. And I knew, we played with the idea of it being earlier, but I wanted you to kind of not like the mother in the beginning, to kind of, through Layla's story, kind of feel like she had a difficult relationship with this woman. But then, and it's a question of empathy. It's like I was challenging the audience to be empathetic, because it's someone you don't like, and through the process of the film, you realize you don't really know her, just as a daughter doesn't know her, and we peel back the layers. And then by the end, you're crying for her, which was my secret weapon.
You have just described my experience of watching the film, because it really is, and so that goes to the tonal question where, in the beginning, it's very fun and effervescent, and the 80s, the color and music and everything. And the mom is a kind of unappealing figure to me. And by the end, I was crying. That relationship becomes so beautiful. But the tonal shift, when it becomes about the mom as the 13-year-old girl.
And we cast a real 13-year-old, so we really wanted the audience to feel what it was like for her. I think, I always knew that each section would have a different tone, and that was a challenging thing to communicate to the different heads of departments, because, and it's a very testimony to the editors, is that I knew the first one was I'm a person that was influenced by 80s rom-coms and TV shows. I grew up in a immigrant household in America, but TV shows and films were the way I learned to be American. So she's very influenced by that, the character. So it has that feeling, pop feeling. The grandmother is a spaghetti western, because grandmothers tell tall tales. And then the mother is more like a Kiarostami neorealist feel. And I think, JoAnne can talk about this. It's, we wanted to keep the playfulness throughout, the tone of this narrator who's trying to find out her origins throughout. But then, there is a shift because someone else takes the reins of the narration, which was always, the second I cracked the script, where it went from 180 pages, those poor producers, to 90 pages, that section always stayed the same, the breaking, because I knew the mother was a co-narrator in some ways. And then JoAnne's job was to make, and was the first editor was Iranian British, and then JoAnne came in for the second half, and it was really to kind of hone the fun, playfulness, and to create a sense of unity in a film that has different tones, and that's a testimony to. I mean, JoAnne was she's a master craftswoman, craftsperson. Is it on?
I think it is. Yeah.
No, it was coming in.
Oh, sorry.
Classic. Okay, here we go. Okay, yeah, no, no, I mean, that was also what made it really exciting and challenging. I think, also not a typical structure, not a standard traditional way of storytelling. It offers challenges for sure. But that was like the really fun part about it, and exploring it together and seeing what worked and seeing ways to weave sort of the story we had just witnessed and told and bring that back in a way that, we feel connected. And we remember, so those words that, Shireen says at the end about being connected to her daughter, like being silent, and remembering those moments that we've just witnessed in lighter times, so.
And we did a lot of, I mean, this is great for filmmakers, is that we did a lot of the rewrite in post, because it always had voiceover, but we wanted to get the tone exactly right, so we kind of threw out a lot of the original narration, and we made it more playful, and we changed it according to the cut and to what we were seeing. So poor Layla, who plays the lead, she was on a TV show, and I was constantly sending her, hey, can you record these 10 lines? Or, hey, could you do it this way? And I was giving her constant direction, and she was sending it to us on our iPhone as a temp. And we were every day getting 10 to 20 lines that we were trying to get the tone right for the final cut. And she was an amazing partner. JoAnne and I, it was a process of improvisation in some ways, in post. I wasn't, 100% like saying it has to be as I, shot it. We knew that voiceover could be a great tool in a greater way than it was in the original script. So we continued. JoAnne and I would be joking. We have like hundreds of tracks, and many of them didn't get it into the film. That we would try, and it didn't work, and then we would try something else. And so we were constantly experimenting.
The voiceover obviously leaves a lot of options, endless options.
Endless options.
But yeah, it was really great, to have that opportunity to, they say the editing process is the final rewrite, and we really did that together.
It was such a dynamic experience with both editors to really, the first editor was really to keep things, because for a lot, you're like, just cut it, it sucks, it's horrible. And he'd be like, patience, it's trust your work. And so the first editor was really about maintaining what I had written as much as possible without me, discarding it just because it didn't work yet. So I think it's like a great collaboration. I think it's similar to like my collaboration with Rostam. Rostam and I, we talked a lot about how do we synthesize things that are very disparate. It's like you have the Iranian experience, you have the Iranian American experience, and there are things sometimes that are unexpected that we wanted to do. Like in the whole sequence where the mother is leaving Iran, you might have typically put a cue in there that was Iranian, but we chose a cue that Rostam had, a song Rostam himself had worked on that was an American cue, and it was a way to connect Iran and America together. So you were never far away. There was the storyteller was in America, but it was about Iran. So we were subconsciously connecting you to the time period. Even though you're watching the Iran section for 26 minutes, there are American cues put in there so that you don't feel it's so far away. And then Rostam was constantly...
That was from the very first cut I saw of this movie. That song was in there, and it really took me by surprise.
You're like, what?
But I was partly shocked because I thought it really worked so well. The first few cues that I wrote for this film, like wrote to picture, I sent them to Maryam, and she was like, mm-mm. She was like, because I guess I looked at this project, I was like, this is an opportunity to really like go deep into the Persian music that I grew up listening to, and like to do a pretty ethnic score. That's what I sort of envisaged before I got my hands dirty. And the first thing I sent Maryam, it was actually the scene where all the brothers show up at the hospital, and it was just like there was tons of Persian instruments. It was modal. It was like kind of grand in a way. And she was like, you made this scene look so tribal, and like this is not it. And at first I was like, oh, this sucks, because I really wanted to go hardcore Persian music. But she was really right when she explained to me, like, the family's been living in Brooklyn for 20 years at this point. This can't be where the Persian music isn't. And after that, I like sort of started to understand how it made sense for a movie that is about an immigrant family to really like express that musically. Yeah,
I don't know, I'm not musically trained, so I don't know how to talk in music talk, so I always talk in narrative ways. But yeah, I think it was a really deep conversation that we don't feel alienated from these people just because they're from a different culture in America.
Right.
I wanted them to feel familiar, and then when we do use Persian instrumentation, it's very particular, and it's used in a for a particular narrative device. But I thought too early in the film is an alienating experience. So, and then obviously at the end we have a Persian version of Girls Just Want to Have Fun, which Rostam did with our actress Nusha, who plays the mother. And that's a perfect synthesis of me, smuggling music to Iran, and then it being affected by Iran and coming back to us at the end of the film. So I thought that was a fun,
Rostam, was that a remix, or was that a complete redo of the song?
Yes, completely from scratch.
Okay.
And the funny thing is,
it's amazing.
JoAnne was in the room when Maryam told me that, like, one more thing.
Oh, it's like 5 days before we're locking. It's like the 20th or like the 16th of December, and you're about to go to Tokyo, and I'm like, just one small thing. So can you make me a new version of Girls Just Want to Have Fun?
Yeah, so it was kind of a mad dash, but that's something that you get accustomed to doing, and yeah, it was a really, I think it's honestly probably my favorite thing that I made for the movie, even though it's not technically an original composition, but I think
it's amazing. It makes everything makes that final scene, but that song is like, yeah.
It feels like, I don't know, we're trying to get it released as its own thing, as a YouTube video, so people can experience.
Like a music video, yeah.
But who knows? Is that going to happen?
What's
the update? Cross your fingers.
Like the soundtrack comes out next week. We're trying to also release a music video around it.
Oh, great!
So,
great. But
I think it's such a great. I think there was a constant conversation that we had, and that was it's really interesting that we did that last. It was an important thing because we had found a way to communicate with each other, and we weren't, obviously, everyone's always rushed, but we found out we got into Sundance, and we're like, oh my God, we have like 14 days to finish the score, and it was just, we finished 2 days before our premiere at Sundance. So we were mixing in the new year.
Wow.
But that's how it always is.
We were so tired. But it was like, I think we had worked together, and obviously I've been a huge fan of Rostam's. He says no to everybody, so I was honored he said yes in the first place. And he held, test screenings at his house, which is so generous. But I think we had, really found a way to work with each other so that when we got to that last moment, it kind of was like a culmination of all the conversations that we had throughout the whole process.
Yeah, definitely.
And it just made it that much easier.
So I have to ask, the cast is absolutely incredible. It's huge, it's sprawling, family relations, a lot of people I'm not familiar with. Lindsey, can you and Maryam talk about how you put this cast together?
Oh my God, it was a few years.
I want to know.
And like who was?
And this is just a testament. Let me just tell you, casting directors are your therapists, because this film was funded right at the beginning of COVID, and so we almost made this film probably 4 times before we shot it. So every time we would have an actor, and then something would happen, and then we would lose them, and then we'd have to start all over again. And I'd say, I'm never gonna find another.
You mean there were these like little kids who could have been stars, but COVID knocked them out?
Well, like for instance, the mother, who's played by a 13-year-old, it was originally her sister was gonna play that role. At the time she was 15, it took another 2.5 years to make the film.
Okay,
she became
can you
too
talk
old.
about her? She's extraordinary. Like, where did you find her?
We did.
Where does she? Does she live in the U.S.? Is she in Iran?
No, she lives in Iran. I wanted an actor from Iran. She's not an actor. She's a kid. Originally, we had auditioned people in Iran remotely, and I came across the sister because I knew their family. Their family were family friends of ours. I knew her father when the mother was pregnant with her. So they knew my family. They were very invested in the film. I had auditioned a lot of people, but they ended up being the right ones. And then she aged out. She was too old. And then she said, my sister wants to audition. I thought, your sister? What do you mean? She's like this little pipsqueak. But she had hit puberty right before we shot. So she hit puberty late, but she's much taller than me, but she literally hit puberty in the months we were prepping the film.
Wow.
So then she ended up, her sister helped her prepare for the role because she had been preparing for 2 years and ended up not doing it. So she was so prepared. She has a 4-page monologue in one shot when she freezes time. It's a very technically challenging scene on every level. And I've worked with Academy Award winners that can't hit their marks like that. She would literally hit the mark every time. She's such a natural. And then Lindsey was like, Lindsey had to find Layla, who played Layla, and the mother, and her process is to go through hundreds of auditions and then make me the short list. And
So were many of the actors based here in the U.S. or Europe, or were they predominantly in Iran?
We were considering.
We have very spotty microphones. Sorry.
We were considering actors from everywhere. We wanted every actor who could possibly be right for that role to have the opportunity.
But they had to be
audition.
of Iranian origin, yeah.
Yes. We wanted to cast authentically, and so we went and looked all over the world. It was such a specific character, a specific role. The whole time I was studying Maryam and trying to match her energy, and Layla ended up being somebody who did audition in Los Angeles, where there's a large concentration of Iranian American actors, and she was really the first one that we built the cast around. From there, we cast the mother.
For anyone actors in the audience, it's funny because she was not my original first choice. We had another actress she couldn't get out of her TV show, so we had to go back to the drawing board. She gave me her top 10. I never even looked at this actress because...
Layla?
No, because the lighting and her makeup was so horrible, I didn't even watch the tape. I was like, what is this? And then when COVID hit, I had tons of time, so I was looking at the top 10 actors in her list, and I found it on my Instagram, and I called her. I'm like, is this the same person? And she just had really, and I said, how is your audition so horrible? She said, it was my first audition ever on tape, and my friend did my makeup, and I looked like a clown. I was like, you really did.
I have to say, for Layla, every time, because she auditioned a lot of times, and including chemistry reads, and over again, just to the character developed a lot in the audition process, and every time she auditioned, it was closer and closer.
She really developed,
until you just started getting chills, seeing the similarities that she
But more than
would bring.
anything, we liked her because we wanted a comedian. And she is really amazing with timing. Like, she's a great comedian. And that was so important to me. And through the audition, because she has to, when she got cast, and she has to read with all of these different people for chemistry reads. She's the lead, and you just seeing her getting into her own, like through every read through, like you saw her developing as an actor, as a character. So it's interesting that through the process you get to know so much about your work, and actors get to know so much about their role. Because we had all the time in the world during COVID.
So did you cast her first and then cast Shireen, the older Shireen, as her mom, or was she already in place?
Pretty much we were circling 2 or 3 people for each, right? So around the same time.
It was simultaneous, but those two sort of came together.
Because they have to come as a package.
Yes.
Right? Because we looked at another actress, but there's no way that she could be Nusha's daughter. Like, we needed to make it look like mother and daughter. And then when we were casting the husband, the father role, we looked at so many actors around the world. And then when the one who got the role, he's a very well-known actor in London, he read the role. He read the scene with Nusha. We were all bawling when he asked for forgiveness.
Via Zoom.
We were like, it's him.
Yeah.
You just know it.
He's amazing.
It's him. You know what I mean? It's him.
And can you talk about the grandmother? Because she doesn't really have credits, as far as I can tell.
I know, isn't it amazing?
She's incredible.
So Lindsey gets it, but I was like, Lindsey, we had another grandmother, but she was very judgmental about the role when we were about to shoot. She's like, oh, your grandmother's so, like, I don't know, slutty or something. And I said, what? That's a real person. I was so upset. I was like, and I said, oh my God. Said to Lindsey, more than anything, I was like, she's really judging this character. I don't think she can play the role. You know, and Lindsey said, you have to let her go. And I said, what are you talking about? We took months to find someone. It was really hard to find an older actress that hasn't had surgery, that speaks Persian. And Lindsey said, we will find her, right? And then I said, we made a list. And I said, I remember a film I saw at Rotterdam by Babak Jalili, and there was this interesting woman, but we couldn't find any information about her. So Lindsey and I started becoming detectives. And it turns out she's a very well-known avant-garde artist in San Francisco. Yeah. And she had been in this one film at Rotterdam. We couldn't find her contact info because she has different names. So Lindsey found someone who knew her. And then the moment I talked to her, she was so funny. And she loved the role so much because she said, you know, older women never get to have a body. They never get to have sexuality. They're supposed to die when they hit like 60 and not have any desire. I love this script because I get to be, you know, she's like, I love having sex with my husband. I love like all this stuff. And she helped me with some of the lines that we did in the film was from our conversations, and she would be joking. And then we added it. Like, she was never in the dinner scene, a lunch scene originally, but she said a funny line of, I told her the back door, not the front door. And I said, oh my God, you have to be in that scene. And then I wrote her in because
so
of a conversation.
she came up with that line.
Yeah, we were.
I was going to ask if you ever had that conversation with your
grandmother. I did. My grandmother had a lot of conversations like this. She was like, she was a lovely woman who knew no boundaries. Because when you're the matriarch, you have no one to answer to. And women, when they're around each other, they speak very freely, you know, much to other people's, you know, opinions. But I think, like, I love that. We would always joke, and that's how a lot of the lines came about. We would improv, we would joke around. Oh, that's a good idea. And even in the whole process, a lot of the fun stuff that came about was through improvisation with the actors on our days off. And so it's like really being awake in the whole process. But Bella was incredible. And it's like, Lindsey found her. I don't know how you found her, but you eventually found her.
And half a show was improv, as I understand.
Half a show. Half a show was, we were joking around. I was saying, I had a boyfriend in college, and I used to always tell him the wrong words, you know. And then I had said that to Layla, and then Layla did the same thing to the actor when we were rehearsing. And because she had heard the story from me, and I was like, oh, that's perfect. So we ended up putting the Khafa show in there.
Maryam, I also want to ask you, the visual look of the film is really stunning and incredibly rich. I'm curious just to hear you talk a little bit about working with your production designer and, of course, also your cinematographer.
Yeah, it's a great team. Like,
and it looks nothing like Circumstance or your other.
It doesn't. It's very different. So I worked with. So I had all, you know, like the film develops, I had different DPs at different times. And then our DP fell out, and we knew we were going to shoot a lot of it overseas. I saw a friend, Aslan Onaldi. She went through the doc lab with you guys, but she had just done her first feature. She shot an entire film in Turkey on a boat for $100,000. It's gorgeous. It just premiered. And I was like, who's that cinematographer? And she said, oh, it's this crazy German guy. He shoots a lot of like documentaries and crazy projects, very difficult projects, she said. And he operates himself and his own Steadicam. We were a low budget film. I'm like, as a producer, he has his own Steadicam. That could be helpful. So I started talking to him. I just love how fluid he was, and he loves to shoot overseas. And I love his visuals. He was able to do so much with so little. And we just clicked. And then the production designers I met, they had done a Netflix show in Turkey. They had built this ginormous submarine. Actually, it's like Tolga Kalanchik. He won Sundance with Butterflies from Turkey, and I had met him. That was his production designer on the Netflix show. I was amazed. They made this huge submarine to scale out of paper mache. I thought it was real, but I went to touch it, it wasn't real. I was impressed by how authentic every detail in the submarine was. And I said to the local crew, this is the people we have to use. So we were able to blend these two great talents. And the DOP was just a lot of books, and especially costume. I make a lot of very detailed books for every department, 100+ pages. And then they in return make their own books. So in response to my book. So that was really nice. much to the dismay of the costume designer, she realized I hate the color orange. She'll never see, like, orange is not a real color in my film. She had got all this orange stuff. I'm like, oh, no. So, like, she learned through the process. She had to eliminate that color. But it was great. I mean, there was always a dialogue. Like, so I gave a book of all my, hundreds of photos of my family in New York. And the production designers created that Brooklyn apartment, or they created my mom's office from photos that I had sent them. Mm-hmm. And they would give me very detailed breakdown of what their response to my photos were. Wow. So it was cool.
Jumping ahead, I want to ask. So the film it's about to come out in the U.S. and
in
then
1 week.
In 1 week, I'm curious. I assume Circumstance has found its way into Iran and is available there, right?
It's a very popular. It was a popular black market DVD. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they sell DVDs? I don't know.
Yeah, they must. I'm just curious your thoughts about this. I'm sure eventually will find its way into Iran.
Don't tell Sony.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny.
I mean, I guess I'm just like, what are your thoughts about that? Yeah. Or do you think about that as part of your audience? Like, you want that as part of your audience?
It's interesting because the guy who did all the animation, he lives in Iran, so I never met him. He works completely remotely. So I was very curious to what someone in Iran would think. Obviously, the actress is from Iran. So we showed some people some clips, and I showed them the first 15 minutes because of that crazy montage. And they really, he brought his friends, the animator, so 10 people came to watch it as we were watching it on Zoom. And I was zooming into their faces. And they were all laughing. I was like, yes. I wondered if it would translate to someone overseas. And the way I met the first editor is he lives in London, but he had seen my film when he was a film student in Tehran. And he loved the film. And so when he found out I was making the film, he had reached out to me personally about saying he wanted, how he had been a fan and stuff. So that's how we ended up meeting, and he ended up working on this. So hopefully after its theatrical run, which starts next week in LA and New York, and then expands on November 3rd, hopefully after that's all over, I hope of course. I mean, Persians are amazing, Iranians are amazing at pirating and... No offense. Dubbing. When Game of Thrones would be out, they'd be subtitling it the next day. It'd be up on YouTube. They love cinema. They love series. They're really this is such an important part of how they get around restrictions, of how they express themselves. They're so connected to the world, even though they're in Iran. I'm always amazed at how that is.
But clearly, when you started this project, started the writing, it was it was a different moment in Iran, and now today, as it's coming out, after a year of women life freedom and everything.
It's crazy.
Going on
who would know? When I was premiering this, it was such an amazing, energetic time around the women life freedom movement. But I think, my films always, only exclusively deal with strong women who fight against the status quo. And this movement was not born yesterday. This is a movement that's ongoing. We're so happy that. We have the Nobel Prize winner, Narges Mohammadi, Iranian feminist, won the prize this year. It's such a huge moment for us, but that isn't born from something that happens in a day.
Right.
That's an ongoing struggle. That's a struggle of women even before the revolution. It's in my mother's era. I mean, fighting against the patriarchy, unfortunately, is not something that's born, today. Not here, not anywhere. So I think it's like a continuum of women fighting for their rights.
Well said. Well, it's so, to go back to the beginning of our conversation, to me, it's so powerful. You really achieved that. The relationship between the mother and daughter, with everything else going on in the film, that core relationship is so
That's
moving.
A challenge also, to have something epic, but to have something intimate. And that's something we had a constant conversation with about the DOP. JoAnne and I had this conversation. It's how do you create a sense of epicness, but you have to care about the people too at the same time. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I found myself getting moved in the second half, and especially towards the end, where I'm getting choked up. I'm like, God damn it! How did she do that? Because it is this big family.
You have diehard New Yorkers that last week were crying. I said, what's going on?
Yeah,
the
I believe
Germans
it.
And stuff. Yeah,
I believe it.
So I think it's sneaky, and I think I was talking with a writer about this. I think you get more emotional because it's funny.
Yeah.
Like, I think if it was all like very intense, you wouldn't feel the same, or if it was all very funny, you wouldn't feel the same. I think the juxtaposition of funny and emotional next to each other is surprising, and so you hit those emotions a little harder than you normally would, I think.
So one last question, just going back to the young Shireen, is she planning to pursue acting now? Did she enjoy this process?
I tortured her now. She actually came to Sundance. It was her first time in America, and her first time in America was at the Sundance Film Festival.
Oh
it was
my God.
very surreal for her. And she could have stayed in America, but she decided she wanted to go back, and it was important for her to go back and make change in her own country. So I give her a lot of. We were so scared when she was going back that something would happen to her. Thankfully it didn't. But she's a top student in her high school, #1 student. But she's really gotten the acting bug, and the woman who plays the grandmother, is in touch with a lot of acting coaches in Iran. So now she's taking private classes. And is starting to do some workshop stuff. So she's really enjoyed the process. She's a great talent.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. Congratulations again.
Thank you, everyone.
Maryam Keshavarz.